Welcome to a very special STORE 2019 edition of the Voice of Retail podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada and sponsored by Purolator, Canada's shipping company for courier and freight. Learn more at purolator.com. Retail Council of Canada's STORE Conference is the biggest retail conference of the year in Canada, spanning 2 days of thought leadership, networking, industry awards, and some of the best retail solutions on display on the exhibition show floor. In addition, each evening there are important retail industry awards, Excellence in Retail, and Canadian Grand Prix New Product Awards. For 2019, in partnership with my friends at Purolator, we built the Purolator Podcasting Studio and set out to interview some of the most interesting people in retail, hosting retail industry leaders from across the country live on the exhibition show floor. We talked tech, brand strategy, retail operations, customer behavior, retail insights, and much, much more. I'll be putting together several special episodes of The Voice of Retail to capture the wealth of insights that emanated from this Toronto-based event. Let's kick off this series with a most excellent interview with one of Canada's top tech leaders fresh off the STORE conference main stage, Kevin Peesker, president of Microsoft Canada. We talked about the phenomenon that is Restaurant Brands Inc., which is Popeyes, Burger King, and of course Tim Hortons, and his journey to the leadership role at Microsoft, more than 28 years of experience in tech that has taken him to over 70 countries, Microsoft's perspective on the retail transformation, and the impact of AI, Azure, cloud-based computing, and the culture necessary to drive innovation. Next, an interview with Joanne MacArthur, a specialist in food and beverage marketing, as we talk about how Gen Z healthy eating now includes not just what's in the food, but its entire journey, how it was made or grown, how the workers, animals, and environment were treated, and how certification matters to consumers in foods they choose and the eggs they buy. Last, but certainly not least, I chat with David Louie, Vice President of Marketing for Marks and Sport Check. We talk about his personal journey to retail leadership, one of my favorite all-time marketing campaigns, Well Worn, and taking on the marketing of two of Canada's most prominent retail brands. Let's kick off this episode starting with my interview with Kevin Peesker from Microsoft. Kevin, welcome to the Purolator Podcast Studio at STORE 2019. Thanks for joining me. How are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Great to be here.
We just rolled off the stage talking to Duncan Fulton from Tim Hortons.
Yes.
Tim Hortons. How did that session go?
Duncan is an incredible individual with an extensive background, as you know, across retail, across government, and now at RBI. And I tell you, coming into it, was not familiar myself with Restaurant Brands International and what they stood for.
Huge scope, right? I was like
man.
you. I was doing the research. 500,000 employees?
500,000 employees, 100 countries, 26,000 retail locations. And as Duncan and I talked about today, just recently in one of their analyst calls, they outlined for the analyst community that they're going to be moving from 26,000 outlets and retail establishments to 40,000 in the next 8 to 10 years. So you start thinking about these numbers that Duncan shared on stage, which got a reaction from the audience, that is literally one new restaurant somewhere in the world every 7 hours of every day of the year.
God.
How's that for scaling out?
Wow.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
Like, how does an executive team keep up with that kind of change? You really have to build for speed and endurance for
absolutely.
Like that,
and
right?
with RBI, the other piece is we had this discussion around culture because clearly they're an organization that is only 3 to 4 years old now. They have pulled together these phenomenal assets of Popeyes and Burger King, and then of course our very own beloved Tim Hortons.
Yeah, of course.
But they've done that with 1,200 people at the core in their head office. And a component of that execution and that deliberateness of being able to be incredibly focused and deliberate on their objectives, on growth, on building a culture, has been one of actually trying to stay small at the center, be very lean in terms of spans of control, meaning pretty wide spans of control, to allow for individuals, as a core essence of the culture, to allow for individuals to deeply take risk and to succeed or not, be corrected, then to succeed, then move on to the next challenge. And one of the cool stats that Duncan spoke about was literally a new hire out of university, and their average employee age is 37 years old across the entire RBI company. But the new hire out of university is expected to be in 4 different jobs within the first 2 years of employment.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're really pushing the envelope about stretching individuals, giving them challenge. The last piece that Duncan talked about in that regard, which I thought was really cool, and I'm taking it for myself at Microsoft, happy to share what we're doing at Microsoft in that regard, is they, from the CEO down through every level, incredibly deliberate about the acquisition of top talent, and then about the management of talent, being the people, once they come into RBI. The CEO is on university campuses. Duncan himself is spending over 20 hours a month just in talent as a senior executive officer in the company.
It's funny, you read
Very
about that
deliberate,
in the
right?
literature, right? You read about that you should be spending X amount of time, but it always seems to get crowded out if you're not careful, right?
Oh, without a doubt. Speaking for myself, if I look, my calendar's quite blocked for the next 6 months. You have kind of minutes at your disposal here or there. So it really does have to be about deliberate focus on what is important.
Right.
And ultimately, we know that people are the core of every enterprise and every organization. So, but most people don't put their time behind that arrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue. Let's talk about yourself. Let's talk about Microsoft. Tell me how you came to your role today, and tell us about your role in the large scheme of things, and let's start talking about what's new at Microsoft and some perspectives on retail.
Super brief background, and I will say that it is an absolute honor to be the leader of Microsoft in Canada. I'm the first Canadian in 12 years that's held the post of president of Microsoft Canada. So it's an incredible honor. I'm just a dude, a little boy here from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, grew up in the prairies. Fortunately, through my life, though, I've been able to have a few experiences which have prepared me. So I was very deliberate in my career. I started in finance, went to marketing, operations, strategy, sales, supply and demand, regional management, country management, multi-country management. And for me, to become a president, I always had this view that I'd like to lead a company. I felt it was important to understand the various functional areas of business. So I really sort of sought that out in my career. The last piece is I also think the world is phenomenal. And it's important when you're engaging in a multicultural society such as we have in Canada. We are an incredibly amazing cultural mosaic. To have experiences maybe outside of your hometown in Saskatoon.
Sure.
And so I've been really lucky to live on 5 continents and travel to over 70 countries around the world, which I think frames out a little bit more tolerance and dealing with ambiguity and others. But coming to Microsoft, I've been at Microsoft for a couple of years now. I was previously president of another large tech company for 5 years before that.
So always in tech in your career?
You know what? It is. I actually started in retail. I was pushing shopping carts at the age of 14, Fantastic. Collecting them from the parking lot of a company that Conrad Black owned called Dominion.
I
don't know if you know. Yeah, we're going way back.
Jeez.
This is into the annals of like the
retail history.
Yeah, this is in the annals of the sort of late 70s, early 80s. Anyway, so I started in retail, and I actually got to work that was my high school and early university job. But I worked in every aspect of retail, whether it was in the bakery at 4 a.m., it was in meats and slicing and dicing, it was store shelves, and absolutely in the parking lot in minus 40 degree below weather. So I appreciate to this day every single person that serves in retail to drive our economy and allow us, all of us, to be efficient in what we do. It's the retail industry itself is phenomenal.
Well, let's talk about the retail industry a bit.
Yeah.
So, the transformation that's happening in retail is pretty phenomenal. I've long said, and I'm on record many times saying there is no retail apocalypse, but there's a tremendous transition. Retail is changing in ways. Retail is strong, but success is not doled out equally.
Yes,
there are winners
and there are losers. Good way to frame it.
It's kind of like William Gibson said about the future, right? The future is not distributed equally amongst everyone, and that's the case with success. So there's winners and losers. And I saw you on the stage a couple of months ago at a Microsoft event in Toronto, and you were talking about things like, and I trying to understand and wrap my head around as a retailer is the impact of phenomenon like AI and machine learning.
Yes.
And I'm coming to think that we're actually underestimating the impact of some of these things. That they're actually going to be more transformational. Everyone says, "Oh, it's going to transform retail."
Yeah.
Have a little hard time getting their arms around it. What's your perspective around that, and how does Microsoft speak to retailers, and how does they think it fits into their world?
Brilliant question, and thank you for digging into the topic, because I think, one of the missions that I've been on from a Canadian perspective here, being a homegrown boy, is, and with a lens of the globe. I actually sit on our global leadership team. My boss is responsible for 183 countries, and there's 5 of us who run regions of the world that are basically make up the totality of Microsoft. So I truly, within my company, have a global lens. And when it comes to disruption overall, or I would like to frame it as transformation better, it is the transformation and the digital infusion is occurring in absolutely every industry. Doesn't matter if it's in manufacturing, it's in energy, it's in the financial sector, it's in healthcare. Every single industry, small to large, are feeling the impact of this rather unique point in time. I mentioned that I've been in tech for a long time. It's 30 years for me in tech. And in tech, you kind of get used to this speed of change. And, if you aren't willing to be on a continuous learning path, you shouldn't be in tech. You should be in some other industry.
Pick another career path.
Pick another career path, otherwise it will burn you out.
Yeah.
But for those people who are in tech and relish it, it always feels like, oh my gosh, there's something more to learn. I will say the factors of everyone with a cell phone, that ubiquitous mobile edge device that provides an unlimited form of information and location analysis is one. A second component is this idea of you've heard this tech thing called the cloud. Well, the cloud is really a distributed platform of computing power, computational power. And in the hands of Microsoft's Azure cloud, in 54 regions of the world, is literally the most powerful computing mechanism on the planet.
And it felt like there was pent-up demand in the retail industry for a solution like Azure.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
To me, because there's other cloud solutions available, and there was trade-offs to be made for them. But it feels like there's a renaissance of Microsoft around the world, and Azure is, I don't know if it's the leading element, but it certainly is indicative of a different perspective for your organization.
Yeah, I think this, there's a renaissance of Microsoft in terms of, ran the core operating system. We have billions of customers around the world. And then, what was the next stage of growth? Charles Handy talks about the sigmoid curve of getting onto the next wave of innovation as a business matures. From a Microsoft perspective, the next wave of innovation is the cloud. But the cloud's a platform. When you apply with the cloud on top of it services that allow for the application of decades of research around AI and others, you then have breakthroughs. Right. So putting these sort of pieces together, there's one other piece, and that other piece is this concept of agile development of software. Fancy term, which just means that every single day iterations can be made to the web interface, the operational back end of how companies manage their supply and demand.
So versus a long run batch process.
Oh my gosh.
We're going to do 4 runs a year or something.
It used to take 2 to 3 years to come up with a piece of software that you would then market for the next year and a half. Now it is real time, every night iteration, which has greatly increased the speed. So you put together those pieces. You have the world's most powerful compute, which allows you to do incredible things around data. You add that to the collection of that data from consumers themselves, and more importantly as well, from the Internet of Things devices, but from store shelves, from the machines that are operating, the refrigerators, etc., in a grocery store as an example, through to the trucks and their delivery. And then you are able to agilely, in real time, align your software to take advantage, and you have a renaissance. So going to the core essence of your question from a retail perspective, when all of those things are happening, there will be disruption if an organization thinks that the way they've always done it is the way they always will do it.
We've been successful in the past, so let's just continue doing.
Let's
keep everything in house. Let's do long runs because it's more secure or more stable.
And I just a message that I would say coming from, this is from me as a president to other presidents, CEOs, founders, managing directors.
Yeah.
When I walk into a company and I get to meet with many of the Canada's top CEOs, I can tell within about 4 minutes as to what that meeting's going to look like. And on the continuum of status quo on one side, and the other end of the continuum, which is, oh my gosh, I've been reading, I've been doing my own research, I'm understanding that I have to start thinking of my business as a tech business that delivers X service. It delivers food service, it delivers retail clothing, it delivers automotive, it delivers food, retail food. You can tell in very quick time where that CEO's head is. And I almost leave sometimes going, well, I really want to sell one person's shares, or I would never invest in that, and I hope the board wakes up. Right. Or the other side is, wow, that company is going to make a difference. So going back to your concept of, there's disruption. For sure, there have been early innovators. We know who the big player is in the industry and others that are innovating. They're innovating around path to market, access to customer. But what we're seeing from a Microsoft perspective is a deep understanding, whether it's a small business or a very large business, and names such as Walmart and Walgreens and Kroger's and Gap and Loblaw are working deeply with Microsoft to change every aspect of their business and upgrade to a degree their visibility into how they operate and how they engage their customers. And utilizing technology is a fundamental platform behind that.
It's a great segue to my last question for you. Thank you, you've been generous with your time.
No worries.
Is this kind of transformational technology that Microsoft brings, is it the purview of just the very large retailers? Like, how do retailers on all different sizes participate in some way, shape, or form in this transformation?
It's a great question, and I would actually be concerned if what we do, and we spend literally billions and billions of dollars each year in research and development, if it only went to the large. Because quite frankly, that would create a massive disparity in the economy. And when we look at Canada with 1.2 small, medium businesses, million small, medium businesses.
The lifeblood in many ways.
It absolutely is. Like I feel it every day, and we integrate as Canadians with the market sector in that way every day. So it would be a shame. Our mission is really clear. It is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. That's not just large multinational global organizations. That's every organization. So here's my kind of call to action on this is we've been incredibly deliberate of taking what we have worked on literally over 30 years in Microsoft research. Quite frankly, it was hidden in the back rooms where we have 8,000 engineers, PhDs in data science and other key aspects of artificial intelligence just working on what are the AI breakthroughs. Core algorithms that have made text to speech at human parity, speech to text at human parity, natural language translation at human parity. Machine learning cognitive thought, so being able for the machine to be able to look at massively complex components, combine them together and come out with outputs is now achieved at human parity. That's all great. It only is of value if we infuse it within our products so that it can be applied for every business.
Make it accessible.
Make it absolutely accessible for every one of our customers. So that's one component. within our Office 365, it's collaboration suite, deeply infusing within that collaboration suite artificial intelligence aspects. Within Excel, as people run their business on Excel, deeply infusing artificial intelligence within Excel to assist with machine learning and others. And then within our Dynamics platform and engaging with customers, building in easy capabilities for an organization to utilize a chatbot. Because some of the stats there are really quite compelling. If you think by 2020, 25% of customer service operations will use customer assistance like chatbots. If we look at more than half of consumers expect a response within an hour, even on the weekend, how does a small medium business do that? They can't staff up for that. And 90% of customers expect there to be an online service portal. Like, these are some of the components of doing business.
Just becoming the baseline expectations.
But building a chatbot shouldn't only be in the purview of Canadian Tire and Loblaw. They're absolutely doing it, and they're excelling at it, and they know they're making deep investments. But every small, medium business can build their own chatbot. So for us as a company, our desire is never to compete with our customers. It is to provide a platform where they can be empowered to engage their customers in unique, innovative ways that allow for a deepening of the relationship, a 24/7 experience, making the small look bigger, and allowing companies in Canada to also go globally on the Azure platform, which is in 54 regions around the globe. So I think there are some phenomenal aspects of how, to me, this is a wake up and smell a coffee moment for many businesses across Canada.
Which is a nice reference back
to our friends at Tim Hortons.
And by the way, before I forget, were you surprised that a guy named Duncan could be in charge of Tim Hortons?
Yeah,
how did he even get
that's
that
right.
job?
Tim Hortons, Timbits, and Duncan, right? I love it. Duncan the Timbit. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, this idea of, we all think as business leaders, the share of wallet discussion is one that is very, very important. Where are we differentiated? And then when we have that engagement with the customer, how do we extend that share of wallet? The component of the data that can be collected with the customer's consent, super important.
Yeah.
But with the data that can be collected to provide a more personalized experience for the customer, allows for the customer to be served with products, solutions, correlated engagements that they can consume that make them feel good and increase the share of wallet in that transaction. And technology assists with that, for sure.
It's a great discussion, because what you're articulating is a leveling of the playing field, right? So
yes.
From any size, scale of business.
Super important.
We've come back to that a couple of times.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. I feel like we could talk for about another hour.
It's been an honor.
Maybe I'll have you back on the program, on the podcast, if you're available later in the year, to kind of catch you up on how the year has been gone. But for now, thanks again for being on the Voice of Retail and the Purolator Podcast Studio here at STORE2019, Kevin. It's
been a real honor. Thank you very much, and appreciate what you're doing to align the industry and provide insights for the entire industry. It's fantastic. Well
Great.
Done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Joanne, welcome to the Purolator Podcast Studio at STORE2019. How are you this morning?
I'm great, Michael.
Fantastic. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell a little bit about your background and how you come to do what you do today.
Sure. Well, I started out my career at Procter & Gamble and then moved to Unilever. Worked in retail for a while, heading up marketing for Cadillac Fairview, and then ended my career client side as a divisional president for Molson Breweries. And then created Nourish Food Marketing, the agency that I always wanted when I was a client but could never find. And we sort of go an inch wide and a mile deep.
Well, tell me what you do at Nourish. So what's your objective? What's your mission? What is it that you couldn't find that you created?
Well, we're specialists. So if you ask us to sell cars, we don't know how to sell cars, but we understand how to sell food and beverage. And we work across the entire food ecosystem. So we have clients who are producers, processors, manufacturers, retailers, food service, associations. So we kind of understand how the entire food ecosystem works. And the nice thing is, when we find a gap in knowledge, we can fill that gap with research.
So you're here at STORE today talking, what are you talking about at STORE today? You're presenting later this morning. Tell me a bit about what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm talking about Generation Z. There's been lots of talk about millennials as sort of society's moral compass, but Generation Z is coming on hard and fast, and they are going to be like that, but on testosterone. So talking about how they are resetting expectations and what retailers need to know about them and why certification matters so much.
Okay, I want to get back to the certification part, but tell me more about what you've learned about Gen Z. Is it about accountability? My sense is there's a demand or expectation of transparency, and they just want to know more than they knew before. I see it in stores with retailers looking for technology that help them quickly say the pedigree or the background. Is that what you're finding out in your research as well?
Yeah, absolutely. They've grown up in a time when there was no before or after high-speed internet. So they are used to being able to get the answers to any question in the palm of their hand. And if, as a retailer or as a producer, you're not giving them that information readily, if they just can't ask that question and get that information, and you're not, I call it radical transparency, they will move on. And with this group, it's not tell me, they want to see it. They're a very visual generation as well. Think of the rise of emojis and things like that.
Sure, Instagram, whatever.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. They're very much, it's like, don't make me read. And they also trust things that they can see with their eyes rather than read. So very, very important.
And it's true, one of the truisms I talk to my kids about is that information is actually, so before, when you and I were growing up or going to school, information was hard to find, and the skills were in finding information. Now the information is the skill is distilling through massive amounts of information.
Oh yeah, right? You think about the fire hose of information that they sort through. They are very good at doing that quickly.
So let's bring this home back to grocery and visual cues. I talk to retailers every day, and they're reflecting they're reflecting the things you're saying, because people are expecting more transparency in one way or the other. They see some far-flung things where you move to touch an item and a big display comes up and tells you about the pedigree, maybe the name of the cow and all that stuff. But practically, that's a ways away for most retailers. How are you finding that manufacturers, and particularly let's talk about poultry and eggs, how are you finding this is demonstrating itself in that category?
Well, I call it, you probably know, I'm sure your listeners know about Barry Schwartz's paradox of choice.
Yeah.
Right?
Too much choice is just overwhelming. Too much choice,
and consumers, and I've seen it myself, I spent a lot of time in grocery stores, not trying to creep people out, but watching behavior.
Sure.
And people actually shut down and move on and don't make a sale and don't make a purchase because there's just too much choice. I saw that in cereals. I see that in yogurt. And now with eggs, you used to just have small, medium, and large. And now look at all the choice that you have.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I walked in, we're a big egg family. I'm trying to master the Jacques Pepin French omelet. I've been trying.
Yes.
I make like 100 of them.
That's the test of a true chef.
That's the test of a true chef. I'm still working on that. But the good news is, no matter, even if I failed, it still
tastes pretty good.
It's still delicious. Yeah. Exactly. But you open the fridge door in the average retailer, and there's a lot of choice. I'm a little baffled, really.
Yeah.
Like I see brown and white, and then I see a whole bunch of other things. So, it's reflecting on how do you make the choice. And sometimes I just kind of reach in and grab something, but I really feel like I want to be more informed.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's why certification, on-pack certification, matters so much. And I think that's why, a part of what I'm here to talk about today is about the Egg Quality Assurance Program, which will tell shoppers that, number one, their egg was produced by a Canadian farm family, but number two, that it's gone through all of this third-party audit. And it's really, Canadians can sleep well at night knowing that our food system is world class. Yeah, we've got really high standards, but it's interesting. Those of us who are in the industry, we know that, but the average shopper doesn't. Yeah. And the average shopper, 10% have only been to a farm. Like, we've become very disconnected from our food, and that's getting more and more with younger generations.
I'm actually surprised it's 10%.
I'm sure over time it'll just continue to fall, right? So there's just this skepticism, And especially with Generation Z, they want to see how every part of that system was treated. How were the animals treated? Animal welfare, very important. Safety. Local is a huge hot button as well. We want to eat local. Great thing about eggs is they're local year-round. Even, they even have egg farmers up in the Northwest Territories. How amazing is that?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but it's one of those foods that you can grow locally. I mean, you can't grow avocados in Winnipeg, right? It just doesn't happen. You got to import them. When I think about grocers, and I trust. I work with grocers extensively and have for my career, and retailers, and I trust them that the products they're putting on shelf are safe. But what you're talking about is something different. You're talking about a quality assurance at the product level to help me make a choice. But that it's interesting is that choice is more informed, not just pretty much the baseline is everything. Food is safe. But what you're talking about is something more, something
absolutely, and it's really taking credit for the great standards that are already there, but the consumer doesn't know. So I always tell my clients, don't assume that the consumer knows what you know, because they don't. So it's a further assurance that this is how the hens were treated, this is how the eggs were treated, this is the inspection, it's audited.
That's been a big deal
really,
too. Right, that's been a big deal too, right? Not recently, but how the animals are treated is important, right?
Yeah,
and so this check mark has some quality assurance about that behind it too. That's great.
And you can learn more if you go to eggquality.ca. But I think that this mark is available for all retailers to use. Free of charge. You just need a license through Egg Farmers Canada. And if I'm a shopper at point of purchase, I will choose probably based on who has that certification mark. So retailers need to make sure they don't miss out and get that mark on their carton.
Well, that's a great transition because my listeners are retailers, and consumers, of course, at the same time. But tell me about the mark. So it's a visual check, it's a visual identifier on eggs, and that is from the manufacturer, from the provider of eggs, or where does the retailer come into play in all this?
So it's from Egg Farmers Canada.
Yep.
And the retailer, all they need to do is speak to them, and again, you can go to eggquality.ca, and you can use the license free of charge. And you can use it on point of sale material, everything, and it's very simple visually. A nice check, and there's a little red maple leaf again.
That's nice. I'm looking at the mark now. Sure.
Right. So it tells me, number one, that my eggs are Canadian and that they're local, and that they've gone through this assurance program. So it just makes me as a shopper feel a little better about my purchase and make it a little easier for me to navigate that sea of choice.
Oh, interesting. Well, listen, it's been great chatting with you. I mean, I look forward to your session. I'm going to sit in. Is that
great.
If people want to learn more about Nourish and about the program, you've mentioned the URL a couple of times, both for grocers and for consumers. But tell us the URL again and more information about yourself. How would retailers find out more?
So you can find out more about Nourish at nourish.marketing, and then the EQA quality program, you go to eggquality.ca.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thanks again for joining me here at STORE, and thanks for being on The Voice of Retail. It's a treat to meet you, and wish you best today, and I look forward to seeing the symbol in my local stores.
Yeah, me too.
And wish me luck on the Jacques Pepin omelette.
Yes, you'll master it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. David, welcome to the Purolator Podcast Studio at STORE 2019. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. Thanks for having me. This is an awesome opportunity to share with you on some facts.
Well, let's talk about you first of all. Tell me about your journey to where you are today. You're a veteran retailer, overseeing the marketing for two of Canada's most innovative brands. How did you get to where you are today? What's your journey?
You know what? It's lo and behold, it's almost been about over 25 years. So I started young. I don't want to date myself.
I was going to say, you start when you were like 5?
Exactly. I grew up in the family business and retail, but I really went out on my own about 25 years ago and had an opportunity to work with small, medium-sized, and large corporations, and work with some of the best brands around the world. How did I get where I am today? I always tell my kids, and I would tell anybody, is to keep dreaming big. Wherever you end up, at least you get closer to your dream.
Let's talk about Marks and your current campaign. I love the current campaign. I mean,
thank you.
You know, when I watched the video of the woman who wants to be a fisherman, a lobster fisherman, I mean, it was such a stirring emotional connection to your brand, yet I love it because it's anchored in what seems to be your essence, right? So tell me about how that campaign evolved and how it took on the shape that it does. It's worn well, right? Have I got the...
well-worn.
Well-worn campaign.
Yeah. No, I tell you, Mark's is a 41-year-old company, continued to reinvent itself. And about 4 years ago, we decided, okay, you know, we really need to elevate the brand. So we've been on a bit of a journey, but over the last year and a half, we really picked up the stride in how we're rebranding Mark's. And we figured, we worked out a new brand platform. It's not, so we don't look at it as just a campaign. It's practically our overall company DNA, right? We look back at, you know, the values of what does Mark's stood for. You know, the Mark's over the last 41 years is known for, you know, for the hardworking guy, keeping him warmer, drier, safer, more comfortable, you know, with our innovation and product. So we looked at the DNA of what Mark's stood for, and we said, you know what, we know Canadians, like we know Canada, and why don't we, through the well-worn platform for the rebrand, it was like, okay, since we know Canada, we need to be part of the community. So how do we celebrate the community? Is actually partner, work with, and recognize local heroes. So as part of our campaign or our further building out of our story, we named it the Well-Worn Collective. And the Collective are a group of people across Canada doing different things, amazing things, you know. So with the three characters of the Well-Worn Collective, that helped us tell the story. And the most important thing is the fact that, you know, we know Canadians and we are part of the Canadian fabric. And it was very important to recognize these local heroes.
Give us a sense of the tradecraft that went into finding those stories. Like, how did you recruit? I'm sure you have an agency involved and you have a clear, you know, mission. But give me a bit idea, a glimpse of that tradecraft.
It was actually, you know, quite interesting. I mean, it's not like your typical, you go and cast.
It's not a casting call, right?
It's really like in the community. Who do people recognize? What people resonate with, you know, your community? And we worked with agencies. We also, you know, through word of mouth, working with people within across Canada, and say who do you like who has a good story, right? And that's where these three came up, you know. Troy out in BC, we got Yager out of Toronto, and Jenna out in the East Coast. They had really compelling stories, right? And they're also Mark's customers, right? And they actually celebrate who we are, and they resonate with what we stood for.
I mean, you've done such a good job of transitioning the brand, if I can say it that way, because when Canadian Tire, when it became part of Canadian Tire, there was a physical retail proximity strategy that was bound to be successful. You know, we've got a not dissimilar customer, we've got physical stores in very close proximity, but you've done a great job of elevating that.
Thank you.
You know, just beyond this proximity strategy, which I guess would have been low-hanging fruit, but you certainly weren't satisfied to stop there.
Yeah, no, definitely the synergies as part of the parent company with Canadian Tire has definitely been really strong. I think, you know, each of the banners stand on its own, but it's also, you know, with our with our approach of this one company, one customer perspective, right? It really services that, you know, that customer in Canada, right? Outfitting them for the jobs and joys of life in Canada. And
you can really see that articulated even in the loyalty program, right? Even in Triangle, where you're kind of connecting those dots. Let's talk about another one, because in your career path now, not just Mark's, but FGL, Sport Check, part of your purview, that's fairly recent. Tell me about what you've experienced so far in that brand.
And you know what? I'm honored to represent and work on two amazing brands. I mean, when the discussion came about with Sport Check, it was like, I mean, it's just the fact that, you know, the two iconic brands in Canada that Canadians resonate with, an opportunity to actually make an impact and connect with them on an emotional level, that was very much an attraction. So two strong brands in Canada.
Sport Check Sport Check's put a lot of time and treasure and thought into their in-store experience, both from a practical perspective, but also from a technology perspective. Is that a core value for Sport Chek?
Yeah, I mean,
or is it an outcome of a broader thing?
It is a broader. I mean, with Sport Chek, we've since late last year, with TJ as becoming our president for the banner.
So it's TJ Flood.
TJ Flood,
who oversaw
yes.
Canadian Tire marketing, right?
Very much Canadian Tire marketing. The whole strategy is around what does Sport Chek want to be in Canada? Who do we want to be representing Canada? And our new value prop is to be the health and wellness destination for Canadians. And we went through a brand new brand repositioning late last year. It's all about, 57% of Canadians are not happy with their active levels, right? And the biggest barrier to get moving is motivation. So we felt that we had a role to play in amongst Canadians to help motivate and really inspire intent to action, right? So we're, in the past with Sport Chek, we were really known with the brands that we carried in the store. We weren't really known for the brand that stood for on the top of the door.
Right.
So we set out to define what Sport Chek means. And our whole premise is to look at diversity, inclusiveness. We sort of remove the high performance sweat nature of our brand. We still have it. We still honor it. We still love those consumers, but we felt that there was an opportunity to speak to a broader set of group of consumers across Canada. So this whole inclusivity with diversity, and we just want people. Look, in the past we would say we would want someone to squat like 500 pounds.
Right.
We just want someone to squat. Right. Just squat.
Just be active.
Just be active.
Right.
Go for a walk or something.
So it's interesting, and I hadn't thought about it before, but you've got a marketer as your lead, and you're a marketer, so it's a really marketing-led, though, it's a little, now you've got someone who's walked in your shoes.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's not just TJ, there's Susan O'Brien, who I directly report to.
Yeah.
I mean, and Alan McDonald is also a marketer, so, you know what, here's my personal, has always been my personal pursuit in marketing, is that marketing and organizations not only focus on the lower funnel, we need to be at have a strategic seat at the table of business. And because we represent the voice of the customer, right? The overall, the customers whom we represent, their voice, we measure, like based on our KPIs, ultimately that customer experience right down to how we measure and deliver an NPS score. Right? So
is that your key, one of your key measurements, the NPS?
Yes, Net Promoter Score.
Yep.
And that marketing plays that key role as part of the seat at the table with the company. So
let's talk about one stop and one start. So what did you do in years past for the Marks and now Sport Chek business that you found is less effective for 2019 and something you're doing more of? You've already talked about kind of thinking differently about the Sport Chek customer, for example, but is there anything that jumps out at you, like, we're doing less print flyers, we're doing more digital, but what's your advice about what works and what's not working as much? You've got such a great career in the discipline.
Yeah, I think honestly it's this whole being omnipresent with our consumers. We've been in business for a long time, both banners, right? And we have a traditional customer that's continued to grow with us, and we continue to love them and their business. So we speak to them in their preference of media. So we still continue with our print flyers. With Marks, we still distribute our print flyers. Yeah. It's a channel that we have not decreased. At Sport Chek, we do a lot of test and learning. Yeah,
you guys were early in Sport Chek, really moving to digital and testing entire areas. And
we went to digital, but we also figured, how far do we swing? Right. And do we have to have that nice balance between how we speak to our consumers. So we have flyers for Sport Chek now. We reintroduced that. But we are more and more exploring the digital channels. Because as you know, everybody has a phone, right?
Sure.
what's the first thing you do when you wake up? Well, you don't turn to your spouse. You turn and pick up your phone. So, we definitely want to be speaking to our consumers where they are. Digital is a point of contact that we need to be in. So we marketing budgets are not growing as fast, but we have to get creative and recognize that we have to be efficient with our spend, but at the same time stretch ourselves to make sure that we cover off a multi-channel, or I try to stay away from the word omni-channel, but it's really omni-channel.
Omnipresent. I like the omnipresent. I mean, you and I have been on a stage together chatting about flyers before and digital, and really the answer is, should you do print and should you do digital? Yes. Right. It's a continuum, and I like your perspective is let the customer lead. But the merchants, our partners in the business, they like flyer business, and it helps drive footprints to the store, right? I mean, that's a challenge for all marketers in Canada and in the U.S. is how do I get more people into the store? Right?
Exactly. And you know what? The great thing about the organization is the willingness to learn, right? You spoke about the merchant groups. They're great partners. The operations group, great partners. They, I'm not saying it just for saying it, but they truly grasp how digital can drive performance and traffic to the store or to e-com, right? And actually how e-com can also drive traffic to the stores. Right. It's not just a pure e-com play. So imagine if all those pistons are firing at the same time, and that consumer at any moment in time, however they're consuming that media, indirectly or directly, they're getting the impression of Sport Check, or they're getting the impression of Marks, right? So when it becomes like top of mind consideration of where to shop, then we're there. As when they're thinking of who to shop for a specific category.
Last question for you: what keeps you up at night? When you think about, some people say, well, nothing keeps me up at night because But is there anything you'd say? Just call it existential to the business, or call it any concerns? Anything that's on your mind?
You know what? Is getting complacent. I think it's a combination of the way I was raised in the industry, but at the same time, things are changing so rapidly. Like, just avoiding to be complacent as to where you are, reinvent yourself, continue to learn is what I believe in, and what keeps me up at night. That are we on the top of the pulse of things? Right. And are we testing and learning and changing fast enough with a nice balance, and trying to find that secret sauce? Brian Hill talks about, don't get ahead of investing. Don't let investing in your stores or brand get ahead of your sales, but then at the same time, don't let your sales get ahead of investing. So I think that's what you're talking about. Finding that balance between the, like you said, the infrastructure and the sales, right?
Right on. Well, listen, you've been generous with your time. Thanks for sitting down with the Voice of Retail. It's great chitting and chatting.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap on the first of several special RCC Store 2019 editions of the Voice of Retail. Thanks to Kevin, Joanne, and David for joining me in the Purolator Podcast Studio. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform, and be sure and recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. You can also ask your favorite home devices, Amazon Echo, Google Home, to play the most recent edition. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc Company, and you can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co, or of course on LinkedIn. Join me each and every Friday as I interview some of the most interesting people in retail and cover off the most important stories within the Canadian retail industry and around the world. Until then, have a great week.